We are back. We are going to talk just a little bit about a couple more small edits you can do in Lightroom. Color grading is really what I want to focus on today. In my last video, I talked a lot about the healing brush. And so I want to get back to showing you some new edits. Again, this is an image that I'm not going to use much throughout this particular lecture or example, but I wanted to remind you, remember that upright guided geometry button? So here, this is an interior image. You can see I am dragging my dots to make two straight lines, and now it's automatically straightened out that partitioned wall. Before it was kind of off angle. And so again, just as a reminder, this is a really great tool when I have a landscape horizon that's slightly crooked, or an interior wall or architecture. Great tool to be reminded of. So I'm clicking on that cross to remove the guide at the moment, or at least the ability to edit the guide, and I'm going to go up and I'm going to talk about color grading. So color grading looks like this. There is a color wheel. Each little button says shadows, midtones, or highlights that I'm clicking on. There's also global. And then you can see the triad. This is a display of all three, as you may have guessed. I'm going to work on these individually. So I'm going to look at shadows. And what this is going to do is that it's going to look at all the shadows that are in this particular image. Again, it's thinking back to value. If you don't know much about value, I would certainly advise looking at some color theory to learn a little bit more. But basically, again, shadows we can think of as somewhat the absence of light. That's oversimplifying it, but that's an oversimplified explanation. So when I'm looking at the shadows here, what color grading allows me to do is that it allows me to apply a color to all the shadows in the image, and that's going to affect the temperature, how warm or how cool my photograph feels. Now, when I adjust the luminance button, right now it's bright pink. I'm not leaving this bright pink, I'm just letting you know. When my luminance goes all the way to the right, everything is going to feel lighter, so those shadows are noticeably less dark. When it goes to the left, everything gets darker, the shadows are more dramatic. The blending tool, again, to the right, my pink is blended in with the photograph. To the left, it's not blended at all. Now I have this kind of almost cotton candy landscape. We're getting into like some Candyland vibes here. And then on the bottom, I have balance. Again, if I go all the way to the right, we're not really seeing much of that hue. All the way to the left, we are now in like neon Candyland. So depending on what kind of effect or feel I want for the photograph is going to change where I put these markers. Again, to keep them fairly natural, not an artificial alien land. I'm going to keep balance somewhat in the middle for this one. Again, that's not always the answer, but here it is. I'm going to move away from the pink. I'm going to try and look at those shadows on the bottom left that I just pointed out. I'm going to try and make them a little bit greener. The trick is that I don't want to make everything feel green. So it takes a lot of kind of moving and shaking with your color wheel to get something that feels, again, either warmer or cooler, more vibrant perhaps, but without making it feel like it's been painted with an outside color. So again, I'm adjusting the luminance and the blending a little bit. Now I'm going to move on to midtones. So midtones in terms of this image, a lot of the midtones in this are going to deal with the sky and some of that grass around the pond. When I think of a traditional value scale, again, I think of black is the darkest, white is the lightest, and then midtones would be that middle gray. Of course, we're talking about color here. But look, like the easiest way to see midtones is to move that color wheel around. So you can see, again, the sky is shifting, those grasses are shifting, a little bit of the trees, a little bit. And so that is what is being affected when I am changing the pigment of the midtones. Again, this image, I don't feel the need to add a lot of variation to the midtones in this particular image. You can see that when I go to the warmer side of the color wheel, it starts to feel a little bit warmer. Again, maybe that's not surprising. So I'm really trying to make sure that what I am doing is balanced throughout the whole photograph. Highlights, where my light is hitting the object or the ground. Again, same deal. I'm going to move that color wheel around, and I'm going to look at, in this particular vibe, that stone monument is not, it's too purple, like you can see. So if I take the luminance down, it does not get quite as purpley. Here I'm trying now, I'm like, it didn't work. So I'm going over to the green. I don't want to make my stone, which I know is a fairly natural stone color, feel too green. So now I'm in an orange territory. You got to watch out for blowing out highlights, which means that you lose clarity. Things start to just kind of like become one big blobless shape of white or highlight. And so I want to be really careful with that. Again, I'm adjusting the luminance and the blending and the balance. Well, not so much balance, but playing around with that. Remember, if I click on that eye and I hold it down, I can see what my photo looks like before and after my edits. And you know, I personally like the highlights, especially that have been added. It makes it feel a little bit brighter than it did before I added those. So we've gone over quite a few things. You are not going to use every single one of these on every single photograph. I just like you to be aware of these. These are the ones that I find the most useful overall, I would say. Now, when I was talking again about color temperature as it relates to color grading, I know I said I was going to use this photograph that much, and I'm not, but I just wanted to give you a reminder that if I am inside, so if I'm looking at something like a warm light, I'm thinking maybe about a candle, or I'm thinking about a fire. Again, I say the flames are literally red, orange, and yellow, right? Most of the time. And that's going to tell me that they're warm. Well, a lot of indoor lighting, I have a standing lamp behind me right now, emits a warm tone or tint to it. And I don't always want that. In this particular image, I'd like to show off the cooler colors. And so I'm going to try and use color grading to make this photograph feel a little cooler. So right now you can see that I am on the midtones, and I've selected those. Again, I want to be careful as I'm watching this because it's going to change all the midtones, and you can see again just by watching how that changes. This is kind of nice, this blue here. It's getting nice and cool. The one thing, and we'll hit highlights here, and you can see again, usually pretty easy to see how those colors change. The one thing I want to start to watch for though is the person on the left. Look at that hair. It's now turned into like a red color, which, while it looks nice, is not my aim. So now I need to go back to midtones and shadows and try and find a compromise between what I had and what I need in order to make sure that hair doesn't turn completely red. So, that was just, again, a quick overall explanation about lighting. Now I'm going to go back and I'm ready to export my image. So I'm going to click on that share button, export. So I usually select JPEG large, but there are custom settings that I can do. And so you'll see that I can change the type of file. It can be a JPEG, it can be a TIFF. It can be any one of these things. I'm gonna leave it as a JPEG. I'm gonna leave it as full size, but if I'm emailing a lot of images, I might change it down to small. And then the quality, again, how high of the quality it is. And I can choose to include a watermark or not. Now, I would say if you are emailing proofs to a client, so you are taking photographs for someone and you are seeing which ones they want and they haven't paid you yet, I would not send images without a watermark. Yes, people can crop them off. Where there's a will, there's a way. But, I'm not saying that people won't do it, but that's a lot more effort than it's worth. And also, if you go to put this on your website and someone tries to download it, again, yes, Can they eventually Photoshop it out? Sure. But that's on them. That's, you know, at that point, stealing people's images. And so I like to put that watermark. So right now I'm just leaving it as a text one. I'll show you the graphic in a later video, but you can see by playing around with those buttons at the bottom, horizontal offset and vertical offset, I can change where that watermark is gonna go. So you may have a very consistent message or you may not. Opacity is how bold that watermark is going to be. So sometimes people like it when they blur into their images a little bit. That means that it is not the very first thing I see, but it's certainly on the photograph. Anchor does a similar thing. It's just a set of presets of the offsets horizontally and vertically. I can change my font depending on what kind of you know, again, vibe that I like. I can choose the color of my font. It gives me a lot of choices, but I'm gonna stick simple for now. And at this point, now I'm ready to export it. So when I export this photograph, it's gonna have this watermark on it. So then when I share it, again, maybe it's to a customer or maybe it's to the internet, maybe it's my portfolio, I will have, you know, proof. I don't want to say proof, but it will at least be on there. So now I've hit export, I've saved it in my folder, and then I am ready to go.